Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and this is the YouTube show where you learn how to spot sociopaths, get them out of your life, and recover from the damage that they cause. So this week, we're going to be talking about diagnosing sociopaths. And yes, this is something that you can do yourself. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, send them to me by chat, and I'll answer them after this short presentation. Please go ahead and send them as we go along so that I'm sure to be able to get to all the questions. Okay, so last week I explained what I mean by a sociopath, someone who is socially sick. On Lovefraud, I use the word sociopath as an umbrella term to cover the clinical diagnoses of antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, and histrionic personality disorders. The mental health field has a reference book, which is called the DSM-5, that refers to these four disorders as the cluster B personality disorders, in case you've heard that term. Now, I imagine you're watching this video today because you suspect that someone in your life might have one of these disorders. But maybe you're not sure, and maybe you don't feel qualified to figure it out. You may be under the impression that only a PhD psychologist or someone who has studied for years and taken tests and earned a license can determine whether or not the person in your life has a personality disorder. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is no mystery. You can do it, at least well enough for your own purposes. Yeah, years of study are required in order to offer psychological counseling, and yes, you do need to be a qualified mental health professional in order to diagnose a personality disorder for some legal proceeding. But keep in mind, you are the captain of your life. You get to decide who will be your romantic partner, who will be your friend, and who you will do business with. Of course, you can't pick your relatives, but you can decide whether or not you will continue to interact with them. In the context of deciding who will be in your life, you absolutely can look at someone's character, or lack of character, and figure out whether or not he or she is a sociopath. You absolutely can determine whether you will engage with any particular individual. In fact, it is imperative that you become comfortable with spotting people who have personality disorders. And why is this? Because we're surrounded by them. So, how many sociopaths are there? Well, the estimates vary, but there's a big, well-known government study that has come up with the following. Up to 3.8% of the population has antisocial personality disorder. And this would also include people who could be diagnosed as psychopaths. Up to 6.2% of the population has narcissistic personality disorder. Up to 5.9% of the population has borderline personality disorder. And up to 1.8% of the population has histrionic personality disorder. So if you add up these numbers, these four numbers, it totals 17.7% of the population could be disordered according to this government estimate. Now, I've also seen estimates that are lower. So when you average the high and the low numbers together, I think it's probably safe to say that about 12% of people in the population could be diagnosed as sociopaths. Do the math. If 12% of the population is disordered, that means there are 30 million adult sociopaths in the United States. 30 million sociopaths. I mean, this is like really frightening. Besides that, there are more people who have some of the traits of disorder, but not all of them, and not enough to be clinically diagnosed. Nobody knows how big that number is, but believe me, you do not want them in your life either. So, what's the bottom line? Millions of sociopaths live among us, and you need to be able to spot them. You can't wait for some expert to tell you if an individual is disordered. You need to be able to figure it out yourself. And that means you need to get into the habit of evaluating people. Now, this might feel uncomfortable, especially if you've already accepted people at face value. But disordered people often appear to be just like us. So you must use your critical thinking skills in order to spot them. Okay, so how exactly are personality disorders diagnosed? Well, if the psychologist or clinician or counselor talks to a client, maybe administers some tests, and then pulls out that manual that I told you about, the DSM-5, and compares what he or she sees to the lists of traits in the book. Now, do you actually need the tests? No. They're all self-report anyway. And what that means is that the clients fill out the papers, they answer the questions about themselves. And if the clients lie, and if you've dealt with a sociopath, you know that they lie, it may affect the test results. So your observations about how the person actually behaves are just as good as a clinician interview and a test. All right, so what are the behaviors that you're looking for? For antisocial personality disorder, you're looking for a pattern of antisocial behavior. Okay, the DSM-5 lists 7 specific behaviors, and the individual must exhibit at least 3 of them. The behaviors include failing to conform to social norms, acts that are grounds for arrest, deceitfulness, lying, and conning, lack of remorse, and a few more. Now, if you know someone has lied, broken the law, and isn't sorry about it, well, those are 3 of the criteria for antisocial personality disorder. See, you can do this. For narcissistic personality disorder, the person you're concerned about must exhibit 5 of 9 particular behaviors. These include a grandiose sense of self, a need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, exploitative behavior, and a lack of empathy. Well, if you've been dealing with a narcissist, you've probably seen all of those. So yes, you can spot those behaviors. Borderline personality disorder also requires 5 of 9 behaviors. These behaviors include a frantic effort to avoid abandonment, unstable interpersonal relationships, inappropriate intense anger, impulsivity, and recurring suicidal behavior. Now, if the individual in question has been threatening to commit suicide, you probably know about it. And you should be able to spot the other behaviors as well. Finally, histrionic personality disorder is the least common of these cluster B disorders, but again, the individual must show 5 of 9 traits, all of which are fairly obvious. The traits for histrionic personality disorder include self-centeredness, constantly seeking approval, excessive dramatics, being overly concerned with physical appearance, and here's a big one, inappropriately seductive appearance or behavior. Now, there are more behaviors that go along with each of these disorders. The lists are available. In fact, if you want to learn more, I have a page on Lovefraud that describes the cluster B personality disorders in more detail. If you want to look it up, there's a link for the page in the description below this video window. So I hope now that you can see that these disorders are not that complicated and you can figure them out. The hardest step may be accepting that in order to protect your health and safety, you must be judgmental. Now, judgment is not a dirty word. It's using your brain and your wisdom to make choices that are in your best interest. Now, just to be clear, I'm talking about using your judgment to decide whether to allow someone into your life or whether you should throw them out of your life. So I'm almost finished with this formal part of the presentation. If you have any questions, please be sure to send them by chat now. I see some have been coming in, so I want to be able to answer them. But anyway, as you begin exercising your judgment with the people in your life, there are two big caveats that you need to be aware of. Number one, do not say that a person is a sociopath in court. If you are in the middle of a divorce, a custody battle, or some other legal matter, do not blurt out to the judge that the person is a sociopath, narcissist, psychopath, whatever, even if you are 100% sure that it is true. That type of statement must come from a qualified professional. And even if you have a qualified professional who is willing to say that the person tormenting you is a sociopath, you still need to be very cautious about using those words. And the reason for that is because the judge, like most of us before we became enlightened, the judge may believe that all sociopaths are serial killers. And if the person that is bothering you hasn't killed anyone, then the judge may assume either that you're lying or at least exaggerating, and that could be bad for your case. You may be better off not mentioning personality disorders at all and just proving whatever the person actually did to you. Now, the second caveat is to be very cautious about saying someone is a sociopath in the media, including Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. If you say that someone is a sociopath or narcissist, psychopath, whatever, on a public platform, you may open yourself up to a defamation or libel lawsuit, even if everything you say is true. And sociopaths love to sue. They love to drag you into court, so they would pounce on you in a minute. In summary, yes, you can identify the traits of a personality disorder for the purpose of making an informed judgment about whether or not you should interact with someone. But once you decide that someone is a sociopath, there are situations in which you may want to keep your views to yourself. Okay, so that's the formal part. Let me see what we have. I see we have some comments. See if there's any questions that I can answer for you. Hang on. Okay. Tricky Nikki. I have read that about 70% of the small committees that determine what is included in the DSM have links to pharmaceutical companies. Okay. I've never heard that, but that may be true, at least with a lot of the other disorders that are listed in the DSM, particularly ones like anxiety and depression and things like that, for which there are medical treatments, pharmacotherapy, they call it, drugs. I don't think that there is any pharmaceutical influence. I mean, this is just speculation on my part because I don't know for sure. But there are no drugs for these exploitative personality disorders. I mean, nothing has been shown to cure anyone with these disorders. There are some drugs that kind of may blunt the severity of the symptoms, maybe mellow somebody out a little bit, but there are no drugs that actually cure this disorder. And I have been to several conferences of psychopathy researchers, and there has never, ever been any type of pharmaceutical representation at one of these conferences. I mean, this is the conference where all the big researchers go, and if there were drugs for psychopaths and sociopaths, somebody would be there, and I have never seen it. So although that might be true for other disorders, I don't think it's true for the cluster B personality disorders. Okay, so then we have Tricky Nikki. Yes, I agree. More comfortable with the perception of people who have actually experienced sociopaths. I can say that Lovefraud has conducted some research, and we have recently published my colleagues and I, Dr. Leanne Leadham and Marianne Glynn, we've recently published a study that you can find a link to on Lovefraud that was published in the Journal of Counseling and Development. And the study was based on our research with people who have sought therapy because of their involvements with someone who was disordered because of emotional abuse or relationship abuse. And the biggest finding of that research was that approximately half of therapists do not understand what goes on when someone is involved with a sociopath or some other disordered individual. So, we've got validation for the fact that lots of people don't understand this, including people who are practicing psychologists and social workers and psychiatrists. All right, let's see. Okay, CC is me. Can someone have antisocial, narcissistic, and sociopathy? Well, if you saw my last video, you may have seen that I used the word sociopath as an umbrella terms for all of the disorders. So your question is, can someone have antisocial and narcissistic? And absolutely yes. In fact, the way I like to explain it is that all antisocials are also narcissistic, but not all narcissists are antisocial. So there definitely is a lot of overlap among the different disorders, and that's one of the reasons why they can be difficult to slice and dice and figure out exactly which disorder somebody has. And that's why I've said in previous videos that from your point of view, from the person who is the target of their antisocial behavior, the diagnosis doesn't matter. I mean, it might be interesting as you know we went through all the symptoms for the different personality disorders, but the bottom line is if somebody fits the general pattern, precisely what disorder they have is almost irrelevant because the treatment for you is the same. You have to get away from this person. So, okay, what else do we have? Okay. All right. How do you think people fall? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a few. So here's a question. How do you think people fall into these syndromes? Well, the research is that these disorders are all highly genetic. So most likely they are unfortunately born with a predisposition to become disordered. However, the genetics aren't carved in stone, so there is an interaction between the genetics of a situation and the environment. And one of the important parts of the environment is the type of parenting that a person receives as a child. And if the person has inherited the genetics for disorder, that usually means one of the parents is disordered. It could also mean that it comes further back on the family tree, but often it is one of the parents. So what happens is you have a child who is born with the predisposition, a genetic predisposition to be disordered, and then you get the type of parenting that allows the disorder to develop. They call it expressing, that the genes actually express. So there is definitely an interaction between nature and nurture, and that's how these people end up disordered. They're born with a predisposition, they get the bad parenting, or they end up in a bad environment. It's important, though, to understand that sometimes the genetics are so strong, the professionals refer to this as a genetic insult, that the parenting doesn't even matter. They could have the best parents in the world, and the genetics are so difficult that the person will end up to be disordered, no matter how hard the parents tried to raise them correctly. And I have heard of stories where that's happened. So the bottom line is it's a combination of nature and nurture, it's genetics and the environment that a child grows up in. Okay, what else do we have? I do feel that they know what they're doing, Karen says. In many cases, that absolutely is the case. The key to understand about sociopaths is that this is not a mental disorder in which the people are delusional. Sometimes people think they're delusional because they seem to believe their own lies. In my opinion, I think they know exactly what they're doing all the time, and they just don't care that what they do hurts other people. Okay. All right, Mary in New Jersey says, but as adults, don't we look around and make choices? Yes, and that's why it's so important to have the information to make good choices for yourself. And that's why it's so important to be able to know, first of all, that sociopaths exist, and secondly, what the warning signs are so that you can make choices in order to protect yourself. And I hope that this information today helps you to make those types of choices and judgments so that you can all live your best life free from the destruction of these personality disordered individuals. So anyway, that's our program for today. I'm Donna Andersen. We offer Lovefraud Live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. So I hope to see you another day. Be here next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.